UFC 314. Full fight card predictions from bottom to top. I'm MMA DBM. At MMA underscore DBM on TikTok because somebody took MMA DBM because that pissed me off. That actually sucked, by the way. That was horrible. Full fight card predictions for UFC 314. Volkanovski versus Lopez from bottom to top. Have never had a losing card since starting my TikTok. So go ahead and give me a follow on TikTok over there so you can get my full fight card predictions here. You can get a bunch of other content. And I go live twice a day on TikTok. You could tell because my voice is starting to go away. Let's go ahead and go over this UFC 314 fight card. Very highly anticipated. Volkanovski versus Lopez fight in an unbelievable and fun card coming up for us. We're going to start from bottom to top as per usual. But if you want to make predictions like me and never have a losing card like I have, I use a couple tools, of course, to help me. Not only do I tape watch, but I also use something to help me very well break down fights. It is called Fight Signal. FightSignal.com is a fantastic platform in which it not only provides statistics, but an unbelievable AI predictor that is 85.3% correct compared to when you use sentimental analysis from social media news, when you use just plain statistics like win streaks, losses, etc., or just prediction accuracy with other AI tools like ChatGPT, Grok, etc. ChatGPT, much lower percentage, and of course doing it on your own could have some own benefits, but with this Fight Signal AI model, it has an 85.3% win percentage across 7,500 fights historically and over 500,000 data points used globally. It doesn't only just use statistics. It accumulates all of the sentiments that you get from your favorite content creators, from your favorite MMA experts throughout the entire world that they post on social media throughout the week or prior to that going into these fights. It has all of the past fights and all the past fight cards listed that you could see what the predictor was. Let's look at Volkanovski versus Lopez. All of its predictions are ready for this card. If you go look at Volkanovski versus Lopez, it breaks down everything about it. It has Volkanovski favored heavily. We'll get into that fight in a bit. It has the grappling advantage to Diego Lopez, of course, the striking advantage to Volkanovski, and a plethora of statistics backed by it, both not only the height and the weight, but also the grappling and the striking statistics. You go look at their recent fights. They bring everything to you, everything that you want to look at. Is going to be in your face. Not only do they show all these stats, but they give technical breakdowns of every single fight and every single fighter. They give you their advantages and their disadvantages, which makes it so much more interesting because you no longer have to take so much time to look over these fights to make your predictions. You move forward. The technical comparison between the two, their ranking comparison and their ELO comparison that they have on their website. Moving forward, you have a bunch of other sentimental analysis. You have data source sentiment, of course, and all the sentimental analysis come with all these other predictors on YouTube, like myself or other people, and how they view it. So percentage-wise, how is the public, how are these MMA experts seeing it? They give you the public prediction, they give you the expert prediction, they go over it. That's what's so fun. They give you the excitement about it. Expert opinions, public opinions. There is so much that comes out of this. And of course, like I mentioned in the beginning, their AI predictor is 85.3% correct as of now across 7,500 fights. I would go check this out. If you guys love predicting fights, make sure you go ahead and check out Fight Signal. It does cost a little bit to go ahead and join it, but it is worth your while with everything that they show. They also have an analytics thing where you can compare a bunch of stats. These are the options that they have for their subscriptions. If you go look at their new analytics thing, you can go ahead and modify a chart for yourself where you can do it average fight time per second. You could see certain fighters, and you could start obviously changing who you want, specific fighters, etc., and put in somebody in particular that you're looking for. If I'm looking for an Adam Fugit one, you get to see Adam Fugit's average fight time in seconds over time. They are so many things on this app, and of course, the main thing for me is the AI predictor and all the stuff they do. So it helps me predict fights, and let me go over the entire card for you guys. And of course, with the help of Fight Signal, I will showcase some of them that helped me. Go ahead and start with Nora Cornell versus Haley Cohen. I don't really know why Haley Cohen's still in the UFC. Should have never been in the UFC to begin with. Women's bantamweight is such a lackluster division, and we already understand that. I think Cornell, her performance against Cavalcanti being a split decision is a little bit of a showcase in that she's a little bit over the hedge of what Cohen is. Cohen losing to Jamie Lynn Horth. I mean, she's not that good of a fighter. Should have never been in the UFC to begin with. Everybody knew when she got into the UFC. It was just a weird signing for the UFC to bring her on. Yeah, Cornell's just better than her. Quite literally, in my opinion, everywhere. I think Cornell wins pretty handily here. Don't want to break down that fight too much. Same with Tulia versus Gore. I think it could be fun. Gore sometimes is a very low output fighter, so it can get a little bit lame. I'm not too excited with Gore overall as a prospect I used to be when watching The Ultimate Fighter. It's the volume and the lack of volume with him leaves himself open a lot. His defense is not necessarily the most defensively sound in the world. I'm not ecstatic to watch a Trayshawn Gore fight anymore. When I was watching The Ultimate Fighter, just a little bit over, just a little bit over. But anyways, yeah, I think Tulio could probably hurt him pretty badly. I think Gore is a lot more chinny overall as well. Yeah, I think this fight could be fun. I think it could be very stale. I'm hoping Tulio knocks him out in the first round. That's what I assume is going to happen. But it could end up being like a 3-round decision where Tulio ends up winning out. It's just typically you're not going to see Tulio extend fights too much. He's probably going to hurt Gore in this fight relatively early. Moving on, Mitch Raposo versus Sumadarji. Now, I was getting a lot of scrutiny for picking a lot of favorites last card because a lot of people weren't watching my predictions videos prior to that of the amount of underdogs I usually pick, right? And I understand this. A lot of people want a lot of underdog picks. I'm telling you right now that this card is one of the most absurd underdog cards I've seen. And I'm not picking it just because people say, oh, why'd you pick favorites last card? Literally go look at all my predictions. It's very variant depending on what the card looks like. I'm picking the guy who I think is going to win. It's as simple as that, and I break it down for you. And Mitch Raposo is going to beat Sumadarji. Mitch Raposo just fought Andre Lima. Andre Lima is a much better fighter than Sumadarji, and it's not even a comparable thing between the two. I think Andre Lima is a much better striker, much harder hitter, much more durable than Sumadarji, much better cardio, much better grappling, both defensively and offensively. And Raposo is a very young and up-and-coming prospect who has been very solid as of recent. Again, watching that Andre Lima fight, looked pretty good against a guy who's honestly one of the best fighters in lightweight, in my opinion, Andre Lima. So I think Mitch Raposo is going to be able to get his grappling going here. I think he's going to be able to set a pace on Sumadarji. I think he could probably get hit a little bit on the feet, but he's been a little bit more reserved and a little bit more defensively sound. Again, watch that Andre Lima fight. I think Raposo is going to be able to take Sumadarji down here, and I think the grappling difference is night and day between the two. I really favor Raposo in this matchup to set the pace he wants, to have the better cardio, to have the better finishing upside on the mat, and I think he's going to be able to get the wrestling on the mat and do his thing there. Give me Mitch Raposo here. I really do think he is going to walk through Sumadarji in this fight. I am so surprised he is the underdog here. Cedric Dumas versus Mikhail Oljacek. Oljacek's going to hit Dumas at free will. Dumas is defensively inept. Dumas is not necessarily good whatsoever on the feet. I mean, he was very fun to watch in the Contender Series. He's a very fun prospect looking up into Contender Series. I mean, the guy was such a finisher. He was finishing guys left, right, and center. It was such a fun fighter looking forward into it, but then he comes into the UFC against Josh Fremd and looks like a complete amateur with all due respect. Like, he doesn't necessarily look like a UFC level fighter, and then anytime he's winning in the UFC, he's essentially laying on these guys and keeping positional over Cody Brundage, a guy who cannot grapple and doesn't really do much on bottom. Dennis Tulin, a notorious bad grappler. So, yeah, Dumas has been able to get on top of some pretty bad fighters. Oljacek isn't a guy who just completely gets set on. The guys who submit him are the guys who are honestly pretty decent overall. Jiu-jitsu players and much bigger, much more explosive athletes like that, like Michel Pereira, like Kyle Bahalio. I think Oljacek lands the left hand at a relentless pace here, and Dumas is relatively chinny. I think Dumas gets knocked out here pretty badly. Julian Erosa versus Darren Elkins. These two fights, by the way, Chase Hooper, Jim Miller, and then Darren Elkins versus Julian Erosa. These are going to be some very fast-paced, grappling inclusive fights. But the thing is, it's not boring grappling. There's going to be a lot of scrambles. This is going to be very fun to watch. Very high octane on the feet as well. Even if it gets a little sloppy between these four, it's going to be hilarious and fun to watch. And that's why this card is so good, because the name value might not be what you want it to be on a pay-per-view. There might not be as many big names as you would hope for, as many big fights as you'd hope for. But my God, the fights are entertaining. Julian Erosa, in my opinion, has Elkins covered on the feet. And he's a guy who can maintain the pace as well. Elkins puts on a ridiculous pace, and Erosa is always fine with fighting later into fights. He has decent cardio. He goes ahead and pushes forward late in fights as well. So I think it's a bad matchup for Elkins in general. I think Elkins can very well get guillotine here. I know he has a really good overall basis in defending shots like that. And a lot of times where Darren Elkins shoots a double leg, people end up trying to shoot a guillotine on him, and he scrambles out, and now he's on top. But I think Erosa has a fantastic guillotine we saw against Christian Rodriguez. I think Elkins is going to be shooting relentlessly to where you see Julian Erosa popping that guillotine every now and then because it's going to be widely available for him. I think Erosa is going to be able to find that guillotine, get his guard up, and then Elkins is not really going to have much to scramble out of. I think Erosa is better on the feet. I think he scrambles pretty well on bottom as well. I don't think Elkins is going to be able to hold him down and out-grapple him positionally. I think Erosa is going to be just fine here. Jim Miller versus Chase Hooper. I think Chase Hooper is going to walk through Jim Miller, unfortunately. I do think it'll be a fun fight, but I do think Chase Hooper is going to edge every exchange, essentially. I do think he's the better grappler by a significant margin right now, especially with the state of both of their careers. He's been a little bit better on the feet. I think he's overrated on the feet a little bit now. I think people are starting to say he's actually pretty good on the feet. I don't think so. But I think Hooper's a much better grappler overall. If you go look at Fight Signal as well, I mean, Hooper is the biggest favorite on the card. But to go ahead and look at the breakdown they have for Chase Hooper versus Jim Miller, I mean, they have Chase Hooper winning this fight by a slimmer margin, not necessarily having such a big over because you need to understand how deficient he is in the striking, how often he gets hit. But his performances as of recent were very indicative. If you go look at the breakdowns they have on the strengths and the weaknesses and stuff like that, you see the strengths on Jim Miller, his win conditions. The win conditions are my favorite part of this website rather. Utilize experience to control the fight pace, which he typically does, end up getting this certain pace that he wants. Exploits opponents' poor striking defense, which, of course, striking defense on Chase Hooper is pretty poor overall. Jim Miller and a lot of other people do hit Chase Hooper really often on the feet. Successfully implement takedowns. Jim Miller can get on top and keep Chase Hooper on bottom, but the issue is you got to make sure you don't have the early storm of those jiu-jitsu players and the amount of submissions Chase Hooper, those that do weather the early storm and stuff like that. And then, of course, the ones with Chase Hooper. A lot of stuff to come with that website. I think Hooper, in my opinion, is the favorite, the rightful favorite here. The younger prospect, I think it's just the age difference between the two that's going to showcase to be very significant here. Yan Xiaonan versus Virna Jandiroba. Now, I know a lot of people think Virna is going to be able to lay on Yan Xiaonan. I think Yan Xiaonan has improved since that Carlos Barza fight when it comes to takedown defense, when it comes to being able to keep at bay with distance, to be able to land those strikes. And I think she's going to be the much more damaging opponent here. Either that or Virna is going to just completely strangle her and choke her out. I'd be surprised if Virna Jandiroba gets the amount of top time she gets and does not submit Yan Xiaonan. If she gets on top, she is submitting her. If Yan Xiaonan is not going to keep getting on bottom, she's going to be outstriking Virna. Virna is so hittable. So hittable. And Yan is a sniper at women's strawweight. She quite literally is a very, very good striker at women's strawweight. And with Virna being a very poor one at that and very, very hittable, I don't know. I feel like Jan's going to have the much more damage in this fight. I think she's going to be able to mitigate the grappling of Virna. I don't think it's going to look anywhere near like that Carlos Barza fight 4 or 5 years ago. I think she's going to be just fine. Her hips, her takedown defense looks better. Her distance management looks a lot better. I think Yan Xiaonan's going to be fine here. I think Yan Xiaonan's actually going to win this fight. Dan Ige versus Sean Woodson. Dan Ige, I am begging you, I do not care about the height difference. For the love of God, please just knock Sean Woodson out, please. I have nothing personal against Sean Woodson. I don't know the guy. I just don't like how he fights. I don't like how he looks when he fights. I think he lost the Alex Caceres fight pretty badly. I hate the sentiment on Sean Woodson of how people think he is good. I don't believe he's good. I think he's horrible. I genuinely believe that Sean Woodson is one of the most overrated fighters in the UFC. Really. Because the sentiment on Sean Woodson is he's a fantastic boxer. The sentiment on Sean Woodson is he's a dangerous matchup for anybody. I do not care what you say. So Luis Saldana put him on the ground. Luis Saldana had him knocked out. Alex Caceres beat him in that fight, by the way. A washed-age Alex Caceres beat Sean Woodson in that fight. That was a horrible scorecard. Dan Ige is going to knock him out. I don't care about the height difference. Ige is durable. Ige is a better grappler. I don't necessarily think it's going to be hitting the mat. It's going to be hard to take Woodson down, especially with that big of a size difference between the two. But Dan Ige is a crack of a fighter. This guy hits with bombs. I am telling you, this guy, Dan Ige, is going to hurt Sean Woodson on the feet. Woodson is very, very chinny. I mean, he cannot take a punch, and he is not durable. He is not durable whatsoever. His cardio withers big time when he takes shots. Those body shots for Ige are going to be right there. Is the knee going to be there for Woodson? Yes, it's going to be there against everybody that he fights. But Dan Ige is a durable son of, the guy genuinely is one of the more fascinating fighters to watch because of how durable he is and how powerful he is at featherweight. He's fought the who's who at featherweight, and he's competed very well against him. He took a round on a day's notice off of Diego Lopez. He knocked down Lerone Murphy, which we just saw Lerone Murphy beat the life out of Josh Emmett, essentially outclass him for the entire fight. Yeah, Ige's always game. I think he's going to knock out Woodson here. I think Woodson's advantage is to try to keep it at bay, keep it at distance, and try to land a couple pitter-patter shots. And the volume's going to only be so much for Woodson to proceed here. I don't think Woodson's going to be super successful in this fight. Give me Dan Ige here. I think Dan Ige by knockout. Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes. Main card. We're finally here. Unbelievable main card, by the way. And I'm telling you, these fights are going to be so fun to watch. Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes. Krylov is coming off of a 2-year layoff. Reyes has been much more active, getting finish after finish. And Krylov is a very loopy striker. He doesn't really throw things with the cleanest of form overall. He's more of a brawler on the feet. And that's really bad against Reyes. I know Reyes' chin. Like, if I told you Reyes is not going to get knocked out in this fight, you guys would be all over Reyes in this fight because Reyes is a notorious, very good takedown defense guy. He is really, really good overall anti-grappling. This guy is not easy to take down. It is very, very evident of the style he is, where he keeps his good hips, he really has a good base, and he keeps the fight standing, and he is going to be the better striker on the feet. He is going to hit harder. He's the guy who's been much more active. Krylov on a 2-year layoff for Reyes just had 2 finishes, I believe, in 2024. Reyes is the much more active guy, the much harder hitter, the much cleaner striker, and he's much better defensively. Krylov is going to get hit down the middle repeatedly by that left hand of Reyes. Repeatedly. And it's going to hurt him. Krylov isn't necessarily the most durable guy in the world either. I think Krylov's going to get hurt in this fight. I think Reyes is going to be able to knock him out because of how many times he's going to be able to throw. Now, the thing is with Reyes, he has to avoid the firefight. I think Krylov is not going to be able to take him down. I think it's going to be very difficult for Krylov to get him down and get on top and get his game going like that. He's going to be forced to brawl. And Reyes has to make sure he stays out of those brawls, picks his shots, gets his counter strikes, and I think he's going to be able to do that. Give me Dominic Reyes here by knockout. Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. Went back and forth on this one. This one, I'm not necessarily the most confident in. I think Yair has a really good volume edge here. I do think Yair is a really good, obviously size edge with the height and the length and the reach. But the thing is with Yair Rodriguez, I'm not too confident in him being able to be extended in this fight where Patricio's probably going to be holding him against the cage. Patricio's probably going to be trying to take him down. I think Patricio's going to be fighting a pretty smart fight in this fight where he's going to be able to pick his shots at times. I know I haven't been very excited about his performances as of recent, especially with the age he's entering the UFC at, fighting a top 5 opponent. But I think Yair is very, very hittable. I think Yair's grappling is very deficient. I do think he can get taken down relentlessly by Pitbull if Pitbull really wanted to try the wrestling, which I hope he does, because I am picking Patricio Pitbull to win here. I think Pitbull is going to be the vet here. I genuinely just think Patricio Pitbull is going to be a guy who's going to be fighting the smarter fight and getting the right points to win. And Yair is going to be landing some of the flashier stuff early, and as per usual. But I think Patricio's going to mitigate that. I think he's going to close the distance on Yair. He's going to make sure Yair doesn't have that distance to do all that. And Yair's going to have to throw some crazy stuff to try to hopefully knock out Patricio, which could happen, but I'd be surprised. I think Pitbull is coming into UFC late, very similar to MVP, very similar to Michael Chandler, and he's given a very high-profile opponent. MVP got Kevin Holland. Michael Chandler got Dan Hooker, where a lot of people thought they could have lost that fight, and Patricio's getting Yair Rodriguez. A lot of people thinking Yair could lose that fight. If I'm not wrong, I believe Michael Chandler, if I'm not wrong, I don't know if Michael Chandler was Michael Chandler the favorite or the underdog against Dan Hooker? I can't remember, but I know for a fact, I believe MVP was the underdog, and now Patricio Pitbull was the underdog here. These Bellator PFL fighters that come in that are very high profile, come and get a high profile opponent is typically a relatively favorable matchup, and I do understand how the UFC is trying to put a Yair Rodriguez fight over here for Patricio to kind of showcase, like, okay, he's still relatively legit. I think Patricio's going to be able to fight a smart fight. I think Patricio's going to be able to get his grappling going. He's going to close the distance. He's going to mitigate this Yair Rodriguez kickboxing. Yeah, I think I'm going to have Patricio Pitbull in this fight. It would have been a wash, by the way, if this was like several years ago. Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Silva. Now, I know the sentiment on Gene Silva is he's the boogeyman. He's a fighting nerd. He's been insane. The guy's last couple fights have been a step down in competition every single time. He went from Charles Jourdain, by the way, getting taken down a good amount of times by Charles Jourdain, to Drew Dober on short notice, mind you. He went up 155 to take up a fight on short notice, and then to Melsik Bagdasaryan. It's down the food chain every single time for John Silva. Now he's finally coming up to fight Bryce Mitchell. He called out Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell accepted. He stepped out of his grappling match to fight Gene Silva. Very fun fight. Now Bryce Mitchell fought in December. Beat Kron Gracie, getting tagged a little bit on the feet, but of course, you don't necessarily expect Kron Gracie to come at you and try to strike a little bit, and Kron Gracie is going to be on the mat. Bryce Mitchell is a levels above grappler compared to Gene Silva. He has only lost to Josh Emmett by an insane overhand right and Ilia Topuria in his career. Ilia Topuria obviously is Ilia Topuria. It's as simple as that. And he's very young fighting these fighters. He's now getting towards his prime, I would hope so, at least in physical prime, right? Little weird things he's been saying on the internet, a couple weird things. He's been talking about his mental. It's a little concerning. But he's the bigger fighter here. He's the bigger guy. He's a better grappler. He's going to be the more relentless grappler. John Silva was getting taken down by guys like Charles Jourdain, of all people. I think Bryce Mitchell positionally is fantastic when he's on top. I think he's going to be able to get this fight down relatively often. Yes, Gene Silva can knock him out. Yes, Gene Silva can completely starch him. I think this is very similar to the Joanderson Brito versus Pat Sabatini fight that we just had last week, where I predicted that Pat Sabatini is going to mop Joanderson Brito, and he did. He walked through him. I thought he was going to submit him. Joanderson Brito defended the half guard like to save his own life, obviously. I don't think Gene Silva is going to be very inactive on bottom if Bryce Mitchell gets him down. I think he's going to be trying to scramble and he's going to get himself in some pretty bad situations. I think Bryce Mitchell's going to be able to take him down. I think Bryce Mitchell's going to be able to avoid getting hit in this fight. And of course, if he gets hit and he gets knocked down, whatever. Ige was hitting Bryce Mitchell pretty hard and he took those. The Josh Emmett overhand was a pretty insane one, the way he got knocked out. He was taking some shots from Ilia Topuria as well. I think the sentiment on Bryce Mitchell's chin being completely horrible is very, very overblown right now because of that knockout to Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett every now and then is going to land some stupid overhand, and he's going to knock somebody out. It happens. It happened 6 years ago with Mirsad Bektic and Michael Johnson. I don't think Gene Silva's just going to knock him out cold like that. I think Bryce Mitchell's going to be able to take him down and get this fight to the ground. Mind you, Bryce Mitchell was a 2.5 to 1 favorite against Josh Emmett at the time. I think Bryce Mitchell's going to be able to take him down. I think he's going to get Gene Silva in some bad positions. I think Gene Silva's going to try to scramble, get himself in even worse positions where Bryce Mitchell's going to ride him a little bit better, being the bigger fighter, probably the stronger guy between the two, believe it or not, in my opinion. And Bryce Mitchell's going to submit Gene Silva in this fight. Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. Now, Michael Chandler has fought the much better competition. He is a lot older. Paddy Pimblett, of course, is a much younger fighter. I think Paddy has not necessarily improved whatsoever since entering the UFC. His chin is high up in the air. He gets hit very obviously. He's trying to fight a little bit more composed in these fights, which is quite literally leaving him just a little bit more open every single time if he's not fighting some insanely clean counter striker, which Chandler is not. He's just going to be leaving openings for Chandler. Paddy's not a great counter striker. He's not going to be trying to find fantastic entries to clip Chandler coming on the inside. Maybe there's a knee for Paddy to come up the middle, but how often do you see Paddy Pimblett really throwing a knee up the middle? And how often do you see Michael Chandler getting knocked out by knees up the middle by taller fighters? He's not. Yes, Michael Chandler is aging, but thankfully, at least he's not coming off of a 2-year layoff in this fight. He just fought Charles Oliveira, I think, November or December. Did pretty well in the 5th round. I think he's a better cardio compared to the two. I think he's a much better athlete. I think he's a very good anti-grappler. Charles Oliveira had his back in both the second fight and the first fight, and Michael Chandler was defending the positions very well. Also, Paddy Pimblett struggled to take down Tony Ferguson and grapple him relentlessly and actually get into good positions against Tony Ferguson. The ghost of Tony Ferguson, by the way. I'd be so surprised if he could do that to Chandler. And if you're going to give me a striking fight between Chandler and Paddy, I'm going to take the guy who hits harder, who's fought better against better competition, who almost finished Justin Gaethje, who almost finished Dustin Poirier. Yes, almost, who almost finished Charles Oliveira, of course. But the guy hits like a truck. He knocked out Dan Hooker clean. One of the knockout of the year at that time against Tony Ferguson. Obviously, much better performance against Ferguson than Paddy had. I'd be surprised if Paddy wins this one, apart from just getting some stupid top time control, which, again, he doesn't really shoot like some really good double leg entries. Maybe Chandler shoots on him and he gets caught in something, but Michael Chandler doesn't necessarily get caught in submissions like that. Dustin Poirier hurt him and obviously got a club and sub coming off the back like that. And I don't think Chandler necessarily expected the grappling in that fight. Yeah, I'd be surprised if Chandler loses this one, honestly. Despite the age, despite everything that's happened. Yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time seeing Paddy's win percentage here. I really do. He's going to be taking Michael Chandler down. Again, he isn't really the best of submission. He's good judo. I think he tries to take people down with some trips in the clinch. I don't see that happening with Chandler. Chandler's, again, a really, really good counter grappler on top of that. He's built he has an anti-jiu-jitsu wrestling build, essentially. So I do have Chandler winning this one. I do think he can crack Paddy. I think he can knock him out. Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. Since the beginning of this fight being made, I was on Alexander Volkanovski. I was saying how Alexander Volkanovski is going to be able to pace Lopez. The longer the fight goes, the better it is for Volkanovski. But the sentiment has changed. I've watched a little bit of tape. Although Fight Signal does disagree with me, I actually want to use Fight Signal to talk about something. So even though they're 85.3% correct, maybe they're right on this and maybe I'm wrong. They're saying 62.48% is going to be Volkanovski. So they fully believe that Volkanovski is going to win by a pretty decent, hefty margin. Now, here's my thing. I'm going to go look at their win conditions, and this is why I do kind of favor Diego Lopez in this fight, and I do think he's going to win. Alexander Volkanovski is coming off of 2 consecutive losses and 2 knockout losses on a year-plus layoff against the bigger striker in Diego Lopez. And the bigger fighter in Diego Lopez, a much stronger guy. I don't know about stronger necessarily, actually, but the much more powerful guy, much higher finishing upside. Let's go look at the win conditions. Maintain high volume striking at distance for Alexander Volkanovski. He can do that for sure, but he also has the shorter reach, and he is a shorter guy between us, so keeping the distance here might be a little bit of an issue. Utilize superior wrestling and control. If he were to do that, you're going to play jiu-jitsu with Diego Lopez. How much fun do you want to have? Where this is one of the most active guys you'll see on bottom in guard in the UFC. Probably one of the most in UFC history, if anything. exploit cardio advantage in later rounds. That is the one thing I do think that Volkanovski has the edge in the cardio, but we want to see how Volkanovski looks at 36 years of age after taking the damage he's taken in a year-plus layoff on top of that. And defend submission attempts effectively. That's a very typical Volkanovski thing, not really a guy who gets choked. But you know what is going to be there? Some limbs. And Diego Lopez attacks limbs pretty often. So if Volkanovski wants to wrestle, I'm not entirely certain he's going to be fantastic in the positioning here. Moving forward to Diego Lopez, land power shots ready for potential knockout, absolutely. Capitalize on the submission opportunities, 100%. It's something where if he gets taken down and Volkanovski wants to wrestle, I don't think Lopez is going to take Volkanovski down. I don't think he's going to be able to take Volkanovski down with some body locks. I think he's going to have to be striking here, and if Volkanovski wants to take him down, welcome it to the mat. Use reach advantage to control distance, absolutely, but I think Lopez kind of uses reach advantage to set up power strikes as opposed to maintaining the distance, and secure early finish before cardio becomes a factor. Now, cardio being a factor for Lopez, he cut weight a couple of times against Dan Ige in that fight on short notice. Now, against Brian Ortega, he did look a little bit slower too, so his cardio may not be the best, but I do believe he'll be coming in the best shape of his life, and if you go look against the fight he had, in the fight he had against Movsar Evloev, he came in on very short notice and fought a very, very ridiculous pace at 3 rounds. This guy is the bigger fighter. He is the much better finisher, much more explosive finisher between the two. Alexander Volkanovski is not known to be a finisher whatsoever. He's also coming off of 2 very, very bad knockout losses at 155 and 145. Really, that's a lot of damage to take at that age and go on a year layoff on top of that and then fight for the belt. So, I mean, his chin is obviously relatively compromised. We'll see how compromised it is, obviously, in this fight. But I think Lopez lands on him pretty relentlessly here, especially early. I don't think Volkanovski is going to be able to maintain the early onslaught. Career trajectories between the two are vastly different. I know Volkanovski lost to, in my opinion, the number 1 pound-for-pound, number 2 pound-for-pound fighters in Makhachev and Topuria. But the amount of damage you take at that age, that late, especially being in the lower weight classes, it's a very, very big concern in a title fight against a guy who's a very prolific finisher, much bigger than you are, in his prime on a ridiculous momentum stretch right now, in Diego Lopez. And yeah, I think it's just very different career trajectories right now. Stupid surging prospect right now in Diego Lopez, now a contender fighting for the championship. Ridiculous finishing upside in his prime at 30 years old, and so much more active than Volkanovski has been. I think he's going to be able to hurt Volkanovski early. I really do think he's going to be in his face and actually crack him. I don't think Volkanovski is going to be the type of guy that is going to be moving forward and extending this fight. I don't think he's going to be able to extend this fight as much. I think he's going to be on the back foot for the most part, and he's going to be able to try to counter strike, and I think it's going to hurt him. And if he's on the front foot in this fight, I think he can have some success. But how long is Volkanovski going to go without getting hit and getting that chin tested? That's my question. Yes, Lopez kind of does telegraph his shots. Maybe Volkanovski starts seeing the shots a lot more often, but at one point something's going to land. And how's Volkanovski going to take it? I don't really think Lopez is going to be able... I don't think Volkanovski is going to be able to mitigate that for long enough to get to these later rounds to where Lopez is going to be gassed. But maybe he does, and maybe he starts taking Lopez down. I'm not necessarily going to be on the guy, and it's a principle of mine, essentially. Of course, alongside all the breakdown and stuff I just said, to where you have a guy that old taking that much damage off of a long layoff as well, fighting at the top of a division, right? Like, that's something where I'm very wary on picking. You can compare it to the Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy fight. I mean, that's very similar to what we're looking at here. A couple fights actually similar in breakdown to that. Sabatini, Brito, and then obviously Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva. So yeah, I have Diego Lopez by knockout in this fight as well. I have a lot of underdogs on this card. It's insane. Appreciate you guys all for being here. Make sure you follow my TikTok at MMA_DBM. I go live twice a day. We do giveaways. And make sure you guys go ahead and check out Fight Signal. Again, 85.3% success rate on their Fight Signal AI. Those are the, where did it go? These are the options for going onto the website and purchasing your subscription. But here's the fight. Here's the card. Those are my predictions. I can't wait to see how this is. And I'm doing a watch-along stream on UFC 314 for the prelims. Not the early prelims, because I have work. The prelims and main card, I'll be live throughout the entirety of it. So I'll see you guys then. I appreciate all you guys for being here, and peace out.